Good morning, everyone. This is a clear path to successful AI adoption in medical writing with structured generative AI pilots. Today, we're tackling one of the biggest transformational opportunities within medical writing, which is how can you adopt generative AI in a way that's actually going to drive real value and not false starts. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll show you a proven structured approach to piloting AI so you reduce risks, measure impact, and build momentum for a broader rollout. Done right, AI can accelerate content creation, improve the quality control, and free up your team for higher value work. Joining me today is my colleague Zach Weingarten, Director of Product Solutions here at TrialAssure, myself, James Green, the Executive Leader of Growth and Partnerships, and managing the chat is our Senior Manager of AI Technology and Customer Success, Himanshu Kumar Singh. So here's the roadmap for today. I'm going to start off with why AI adoption matters now, specifically within medical writing. We're going to talk through some of the key pitfalls and how your teams can overcome them. And then we'll work over what an AI pilot program looks like, the design, the execution, and the results you might see. Follow that up with some next steps and open up to questions. So let's dive in and explore how to get AI right in this critical moment here in 2025. So here's some of the things that we're hoping you're going to walk away from today with. Proven strategies around running a pilot of generative AI within medical writing and how you can mitigate some risks, clear guidance on defining your AI roadmap, understanding the business case essentials, how you're going to benchmark productivity gains against current metrics, some real world insights around the types of speed, quality, and feedback that we've seen and that you can set expectations for when you run your own pilots. And then some tips around the change management piece, which is one of the areas that it often gets understated when people start branching into an AI adoption, but is really important if you really want to see success long term. So, why does this all matter right now? You know, right now, we're seeing across the industry that there's a shift in the kind of opinion around what medical writing and generative AI mean. You know, early on when OpenAI and the other large LLMs came on, there was big fears around like, is it just going to completely replace medical writers? But what we're seeing is not a replacement of medical writers, but it's medical writers that are not leveraging AI will replace those that don't. And early adopters are seeing over 30% productivity gains, and it's causing a huge competitive pressure. Those who continue to delay in adopting AI, it's going to fall behind in efficiencies and times to market, and that's going to impact not just their teams, but their entire organizations as a whole. Generative AI can help you automate a first draft and for a number of different documents, getting ready for QC and reviews, and this really frees your writers up for the more strategic analysis. So we know now, okay, why now? But is there a big risk if you don't get it right? Can we just do an in-house project or will I see immediate results? No, we're seeing that over 30% of generative AI experiments defer their time to value by 3 to 5 years, and about 10% of them actually achieve their goals when they're done in-house. Foul pilots can not only waste budget, but they also start to erode trust within your organization on the actual value of AI. And that's why it's important if you're choosing to take this step, you do so with a structured approach because it's going to ensure that you have the ability to build a platform to grow your organization's view of leveraging AI long term. So, here are some of the challenges that we see common pitfalls include like unclear goals or roadmap. When there's no defined milestones, it stalls progress because even if you see some kind of results, if you're not benchmarking it against a clearly defined goal or objective, it really is hard to lead to that creating organizational change. Technology workflow mismatch, tools that just don't align with your team's expectations see poor adoption. If there's a lack of measurable outcomes, it's extremely hard for you to show the return of investment in the pilot, which could lead to success long term. And if there's insufficient change management, this leads to no buy-in and constant resistance and lower usage long term. And the sum of all of that is that if you don't take the time to really plan out how a pilot program is going to be successful, you often get left with fragmented ownership, which causes these pilots to fail when they try to be opened up to a cross-functional support team. And what we aim to give you over the next few slides is some ways to address this head on. So we'll start off with the pilot planning process. A structured approach of understanding the people, process, and platform to help identify the most high impact use case, such as working on a CSR or patient narratives as your first pilot for medical writing. It's going to help you assemble the right team of writers, IT, leadership, and set clear goals against the metrics of what it currently takes, what level of quality you'd be looking for from a first draft from AI, and the types of user satisfaction that you can measure. You then move over into the implementation where you do real world workflow testing and finish up with the evaluation of how the pilot went. So during that pilot planning stage, it's so important to focus in not just which is the most highest impact use case, but also which one are you going to see the quickest return on investment with? Because it's also about being agile right now within adoption of AI. If it's going to be, a huge impact, but it's going to take you a year to get the results, that may not be something that you should take on as your first step. For the pilot implementation, it's all about how you're going to configure the tool. Knowing that you want to do it for a CSR means, okay, you're going to bring in the templates. What prompts are going to be used? Are there any other integrations that are needed? You have to have hands-on end user training to ensure that it builds confidence in the technology that you're leveraging. And then actually start generating drafts, doing expert review, and gathering feedback. And this will lead you to the final step where you're doing the evaluation of how your pilot program went and the roadmap to finalization. This is where it's all about assessing how the outcomes compared to the actual versus target metrics. Were you able to build that business case? Could you quantify the amount of time saving, cost savings, or quality improvements that were gained through leveraging the technology? And the goal here is that you want to ensure you can develop the enterprise roadmap that you can take to your teams and your senior leadership to say, these are the document types we need to prioritize and the teams that can be scaled up quickly using technology. So when we look at the journey of what we've seen in the last few years of kind of AI evolution, it's really been about kind of changing from status quo of manual authoring to a kind of level one adoption where you're getting some level of automation, but it's not fully automated. And now we're transitioning with the newer models into like this full scale development. So here's an example where informed consent manually was taking 95 hours, hugely resource intensive, and required multiple cycles impacting timelines. By using Link AI for authoring, the team were able to see a reduction down to 19 hours. That was 80% faster than their typical production, which immediately saw value. And that pilot led to success for their team. From there, the organization is now opting to not just do ICFs, but CSIs, IBs, patient narratives, and are constantly adding more and more clinical and safety documents into their pipeline of documents to enhance using AI. So if you're interested around kind of starting your journey or having a more personalized conversation about how you might be able to run a pilot program to explore using AI within medical writing, please reach out. Myself or my team are happy to have a conversation, share our learnings of approaches that have worked for our clients and can work for you. Right. And with that, I'll open up to questions. So I don't see any questions in the chat just yet, but I do have one question that came in ahead of time, which is, are there different types of pilot programs that you can run? So this is one that we hear a lot. Sometimes teams really want to test the quality of an AI output, but they don't have the team bandwidth to actually invest in doing a hands-on pilot. What we see here is actually where teams will ask to do a hands-off pilot. What that means is they ask a company like ourselves to do the pilot run of using technology to develop the kind of first draft of, say, a plain language summary or a CSR, and then their team will review those outputs. You then benchmark those timelines that were taken, but you don't have to have the training required to get your team up to speed on using new technology. You can just kind of gauge how much the timeline can be impacted through leveraging the technology. The other option is a very hands-on approach where teams, really start off with one document type. They get to know the solution. They have maybe some manual benchmarks that they've already done, and then they test various renditions of doing the document to see how it aligns to new outcomes. With those more hands-on pilots, we typically see maybe over a month or two teams working on creating either a first draft or a full final document and comparing how that aligns to their manual process. But what we have seen across almost all our pilots is a gain of over 50% in terms of time saving on most document types, which is really exciting to see. And what does that actually mean to you and your teams? It means that you can actually take that time and instead of having to do some of the laborious stuff that medical writing teams don't enjoy doing, like the cross-referencing of data into documents, they can start doing the strategic reviews that take time and adjusting so it aligns to their company's standards or freeing them up to do other projects. Steve, I see you have a question. So your question is, do you have practical examples that you can show what a pilot output looks like and how close to final does the first draft get? Perfect. Yep. Let me pass you over to my colleague Zach, who can give us a little bit more detail on some of the kind of examples that we've seen within our pilot programs that we can share.
Sure thing, James. Our initial drafts that we've seen are what we consider to be a draft one. It's the feedback is that it's very close. There is some, often some tweaking, sometimes directly to the text or prompt refinement to get a better response. So an example we were just working on was one of the sections in a CSR that we were working on was still written in future tense, and then obviously in the CSR you want it in past tense. So that was a good example of adding an additional statement in the prompt to then convert that paragraph into past tense at the basically the click of a button rather than manually having to change the tense. So there is, sometimes things like that. Ideally, you have that set up. So on the onset, you have the tense correct, but other kind of examples like that require, the writer to go through and try to find things. But it's in our experience a pretty good first draft. As for sharing an example, yeah, I think we'd be happy to follow up offline. I don't have anything prepared that's uh, not proprietary that I can just show right now, but we'd be certainly happy to follow up and provide an example.
No problem. Were there any other questions at all from the audience? So one of the other questions that I had ahead of time, which was how many team members need to be on on a successful pilot for it to really work for my team? And that really does depend on the size of the organization. We see some teams where they've got, two or three medical writers total within their organization. For those smaller organizations, I recommend that it's a full team pilot if it's a hands-on approach, because what your goal of with a pilot is actually future adoption as opposed to just, spending time for one person to say this might work. For larger teams where maybe you've got 10 to 20 writers, that's where maybe just choosing a subset of writers to do the pilots to kind of do it more of a proof of concept for the greater team work well. If there are no more questions, I'm happy to wrap up and let everyone enjoy the rest of their Thursday. But I really appreciate everyone's attention and hope this was useful as you plan pilot programs for your own organizations around adopting generative AI within medical writing and structured content generation.